In the mid-14th century, a devastating force swept through Europe, Asia, and Africa, leaving despair and destruction in its wake. This was the Black Death, one of the deadliest pandemics in human history. Originating in Asia, the Black Death traveled along the Silk Road, reaching the Crimea by 1347. From there, it was just a matter of time before the disease was carried by fleas living on black rats that boarded merchant ships headed towards Europe. By the time the plague subsided, it had claimed the lives of an estimated 75 to 200 million people, striking as much as 60% of the European population in severe locales. Cities were the hardest hit, some losing half their inhabitants in a matter of months. The social consequences were profound. Traditional structures of medieval society were shaken as labor shortages empowered serfs, leading to revolts and significant changes in the feudal system. Towns and cities passed laws to deal with the catastrophe, and public health measures, like quarantines and mass burials, became common. Politically, the plague shifted the balance of power. Monarchies and local lords struggled to maintain control as the pandemic undermined social cohesion and economic stability. The Church, too, faced challenges. With so many dying and the clergy overwhelmed, the Church's influence wavered as it struggled to explain the suffering and provide comfort. As we delve deeper into this dark chapter of history, we will uncover the stories of bizarre behaviors, drastic measures, and the extraordinary human responses to this catastrophic event. In our journey, we'll visit some of the most unusual and intriguing events that occurred during the time of the Black Death. Stay tuned. As the Black Death ravaged Europe in the 14th century, killing an estimated third of the continent's population, a radical religious movement arose from the depths of despair and fear. They were known as the Flagellants. Emerging in 1349, the Flagellants were zealots who believed the plague was God's punishment for humanity's sins. Their solution was extreme penance. Men and women would publicly whip themselves, hoping their suffering would appease God's wrath and halt the spread of the disease. The movement spread as quickly as the plague itself. Groups of Flagellants traveled from town to town, their numbers swelling. They performed gruesome rituals, lashing their backs with whips embedded with iron spikes, chanting and praying as they marched through the streets. Local clergy and secular authorities initially tolerated the Flagellants, perhaps seeing them as a manifestation of popular piety in a time of crisis. However, their tolerance soon turned to fear and hostility. The Flagellants not only challenged the authority of the Church by asserting that their direct penance could replace the sacraments, but their gatherings also often turned into frenzied mobs that incited violence and spread further panic. By the late 1340, the Church officially condemned the Flagellants. Pope Clement VI denounced them heretical, fearing their influence and disputing their theological claims. Despite the Church's condemnation, the Flagellant movement highlighted the extreme societal impacts of the Black Death. It was a stark illustration of how fear and desperation can drive humans to extraordinary and often self-destructive acts. The Flagellant movement faded as quickly as it had appeared, but it left behind a legacy of how deeply the Black Death has scarred the psyche of medieval Europe. In 1348, as the Black Death mercilessly swept through Europe, one of the most powerful men of the time, Pope Clement VI, found himself confronted with a pandemic that spared neither peasant nor prince. While the plague ravaged the population, the Pope was advised by physicians that the pestilence was transmitted through the air. In an attempt to shield himself from the deadly miasma, Clement VI resorted to an extraordinary measure. Believing that pure air could ward off the disease, Clement VI ordered that great fires be kept burning around him day and night. This ring of fire was meant to purify the air he breathed, creating a barrier between himself and the plague. This unusual precaution took place within the walls of the papal palace in Avignon, where the Pope spent many of his days enveloped in smoke and heat, even during the sweltering heat of the summer months. Despite skepticism from some quarters, Clement VI's fiery barrier may have been effective, at least in his case. The Pope survived the pandemic, a feat that many attributed to divine protection or the efficacy of his fiery sanctuary. Clement VI's tenure was marked by more than his survival. He also took significant steps to aid the victims of the plague. He condemned the persecution of Jews, whom many blamed for the disease, and issued papal bulls to protect them. As we reflect on the Black Death's impact, the story of Pope Clement VI and his holy fire underscores the fear and desperation that even the era's most powerful figures felt, and the extraordinary length to which they would go to protect themselves. As the Black Death cast a shadow over Europe, a peculiar figure emerged from the gloom: the plague doctor, clad in a striking costume that has since become an iconic symbol of pandemics. These medical practitioners were often the last hope for those suffering from the plague. They wore a distinctive leather or waxed fabric overcoat and a mask with a long, curved beak. The beak, packed with theriac, a mixture of herbs, spices, and sometimes dried flowers like lavender or camphor, was designed to purify the air breathed by the doctor. This was based on the miasma theory, which posited that the plague was spread through bad air. The outfit was not just for protection, it served as a walking advertisement for their services. At a time when the understanding of disease was rudimentary, the Beak doctor's costume was intended to fend off disease and inspire confidence in the terrified populace. Despite their striking appearance, the effectiveness of plague doctors was limited. Many were not formally trained physicians, but rather second-rate doctors of charlatans, exploiting public fear for profit. Their treatment varied from the reasonable, such as urging the sick to drink clean water and breathe fresh air, to the bizarre, like applying live frogs to plague boils to rebalance the humors. Yet, in the face of overwhelming mortality, the plague doctor's presence, however ineffective, provided a glimmer of hope. Their commitment to venturing into the heart of the plague-ridden areas, where few dared to go, marked them as both brave and tragic figures. The image of the Beak doctor, a haunting reminder of the Black Death's terror, endures in our collective memory. It symbolizes the eternal struggle between humanity and its unseen microbial enemies. As we look back through the corridors of time, the Beak doctor stands as a testament to human resilience and the perpetual quest for understanding in the face of the unknown. As the Black Death ravaged Europe, fear and uncertainty permeated every corner of society. The overwhelming dread often manifested in mass hysteria and led to devastating witch hunts. The plague's mysterious and rapid spread led to rampant speculation and fear-mongering. Without a scientific understanding of disease transmission, communities desperately sought a scapegoat to explain the suffering and death surrounding them. In many places, this scapegoating took a dark turn towards the persecution of those deemed responsible for invoking the plague. Often, these accusations fell upon the most vulnerable or marginalized members of society. Witch hunts became tragically common. Accused witches were blamed for cursing their communities with the plague. Trials, based on flimsy evidence or coerced confessions, frequently ended with executions, which were believed to cleanse the towns of evil. These trials and executions were not just about fear of the plague, they reflected deeper social and religious tensions. The chaos of the plague provided a pretext for resolving personal vendettas, seizing property, or reinforcing social norms. As the plague eventually receded, the witch hunts did too, but the scars left on communities were indelible. The witch hunts of the plague era serve as a grim reminder of how fear can drive humanity to extreme acts of cruelty and superstition. As the Black Death ravaged Europe in the mid-14th century, it left not only a trail of death, but also one of profound societal upheaval. Amidst the chaos, deeply rooted superstitions and prejudices surfaced with deadly consequences, particularly for the Jewish communities. Fueled by fear and seeking a scapegoat for the plague, hysteria among European populace led to widespread accusations against Jews, falsely claiming they had caused the disease by poisoning wells and water sources. These baseless accusations quickly spiraled into violent riots and massacres. One of the most horrific pogroms occurred in Strasbourg in February 1349, where hundreds of Jews were burned alive after a forced confession from tortured members of the community. The City Council of Strasbourg initially opposed the massacre, but with mounting pressure from the guilds and the fear-stricken populace, they eventually acquiesced, and on Valentine's Day, the Jewish quarter was razed, and its inhabitants perished in the flames. Despite Pope Clement VI issuing papal bulls that defended Jews, stating they were suffering from the plague just like Christians, his pleas were often ignored. The scapegoat continued, leading to thousands of Jews across Europe being killed or expelled from their homes. These persecutions not only devastated Jewish communities, but also left a permanent scar on European society, revealing the dangerous power of fear and misinformation during times of crisis. As we reflect on the profound impacts of the Black Death and the extraordinary human responses it evoked, we are reminded of the enduring lessons of history. Let's carry forward the spirit of understanding and resilience. If you enjoyed this journey through the past, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps us bring more like this to light.